So today, we're diving into a fight that's happening in backyards and at ballot boxes all across the country. We're talking about the battle over housing.
You know, it really feels like a paradox, doesn't it? If you look at the polls, there's overwhelming support for making housing more affordable. But the second a new apartment building gets proposed, poof, the project stalls out or it gets voted down. It's where this big abstract idea of affordable housing just slams into a very local, very personal brick wall.
And to really get to the bottom of this tension, we're going to head to Colorado. Recent elections there give us a perfect snapshot of this exact fight. From the suburbs of Denver all the way to the ritzy mountain resort towns, voters are making decisions that are going to define their communities for decades. Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage. Colorado's state government has been trying really hard to tackle the housing crisis from the top down, pushing for some pretty broad changes. But as we're about to see, that big push is being met with some serious local pushback. The state's whole strategy is basically about two things: density and variety. They're trying to get cities to make it way easier to build more homes, especially near public transit. This includes stuff like legalizing accessory dwelling units, ADUs, sometimes called granny flats. They're also trying to scrap old rules that force developers to build these massive, unnecessary parking lots and to get more duplexes and triplexes built in neighborhoods that have only ever had single-family homes. Now, to get all this done, Governor Polis rolled out the classic stick and carrot plan. He offered up over $280 million in grants for cities that would, play ball. But a lot of the suburbs, they were not having it. Big suburbs like Aurora and Arvada just straight up sued, arguing the state was massively overstepping its authority. And just like that, you've got a huge showdown between state and local power. And that local pushback, it really comes down to one powerful four-letter acronym: NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's that feeling of, sure, I support new housing, just not here, not on my street. This one idea is the absolute key to understanding what happened when these issues finally landed on the local ballot. All right, so let's see how this actually plays out on the ground. First, we're heading up into the mountains, where all that beautiful scenery is kind of masking a really severe crisis. Property values are through the roof, mostly thanks to tourism and short-term rentals, which means the people who actually work there, the waiters, the ski lift operators, have literally nowhere to live. So here we have two towns facing the exact same problem. They took totally different approaches to solve it and somehow ended up in the exact same spot. Telluride asked voters to borrow money to build more housing. Estes Park asked voters to kill rules that made it easier to build. And in both towns, the voters' answer was a loud and clear no to more development.
I mean, just look at Telluride. This is a place where everyone knows there's a housing crisis for local workers. It's not a secret. And still, 56% of voters rejected the plan to take on debt to fix it. It seems like the desire to fund a solution was just outweighed by other concerns, like taxes or maybe the size of the projects.
And in Estes Park, wow, the result was even more direct. Voters passed a measure that pretty much gives neighbors a veto power over new projects. I mean, can you imagine trying to build a new apartment complex when you have to get a thumbs up from 2/3 of the property owners within 500 feet? That is an incredibly powerful tool for just stopping development dead in its tracks.
Okay, let's head down from the mountains now to the Denver suburb of Littleton, because the vote there paints a much more confusing picture of what voters actually want. This one's a real head-scratcher.
So here's the voice of the opposition. You had this local homeowners group called Rooted in Littleton, and they framed the whole debate around preserving the town's character. They argued pretty successfully that the mayor's pro-density policies, which he called gentle density, were actually a huge threat to their small-town charm. And then on the other side, you've got the mayor, Kyle Schlachter. He was arguing against the ballot measure not just because he disagreed with it, but on a really practical level. He was basically warning everyone that putting specific land use rules into the city's charter is a terrible idea. It's rigid, it's confusing, and it's probably just going to lead to a bunch of lawsuits and gridlock.
And this is where it gets really strange. The very same voters who passed that anti-density amendment also re-elected the pro-density mayor who was fighting against it. And get this, they re-elected him by an even wider margin than the amendment passed. So what in the world is going on here?
Oh, it gets even weirder. The group that pushed so hard for that anti-density policy, Rooted in Littleton, they backed a whole slate of their own candidates for city council and mayor, and every single one of them lost. Voters went for the policy but completely rejected the politicians who were promoting it. It's like voters might be trying to have it both ways. They like their mayor, but they also wanted to put a check on his power, using this ballot measure as a kind of leash.
So when you step back and put all of these pieces together, what does it all mean? Well, these aren't just a few isolated votes. They're pointing to a really powerful trend, one that has massive implications for housing affordability everywhere.
This quote from a local real estate expert, Kathy Barsnar, I think it just hits the nail on the head. The bigger fear here is that the whole NIMBY thing is scaling up. It's not just about stopping an apartment building on your block anymore. It's about using the ballot box to create citywide rules that restrict all new housing everywhere inside the city limits. It's become not in my city.
And that is the absolute heart of the problem. Housing is a regional issue, right? But the decisions are being made one town, one city at a time. And when every single community votes to protect its, quote, character by stopping growth, the math just doesn't work. It just kicks the can down the road, pushing the crisis onto the next town over and onto the next generation. Which leaves us with one final critical question. If everyone says, not in my city, then where will people live?